you all to a wonderful session that we are excited to have a dialogue with you all today. And we're just waiting on our colleagues to be placed in the room with us. So as soon as they get here, we will jump right in. But while we have a few minutes, we'd love to hear from each of you and what brought you to our session. So we'll kick it off with Kenyatta.
I apologize. I'm multitasking. Our teams are meeting right now, and this is like an informational session, so I apologize. I heard my name called, but I wasn't listening. I'm just being honest. What am I supposed to be doing right now?
Oh, just what brought you to our session.
Oh, okay. This is the community development session, right? For housing development?
Well, it is equity and properties in the neighborhood. So it is housing development, but it's also looking at innovative land use and access to land for residents in the city of Detroit.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I apologize. Because I wasn't sure if I had selected the correct breakout. But for Cody Rouge community, we don't have like a whole bunch of open land per se, but we have quite a few vacant properties in our community. And our agency per se doesn't really do a lot around housing. However, one of our community partners, Joy Southfield, is going to be leading that effort. So I just kind of wanted to be here to be involved to kind of hear, and then just make sure that I can relay that information to Joy Southfield, make sure that they're connected, as well as our our community residents as well.
All right, awesome. So we will kick it over to Ms. Gransberry.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Ashley.
Hey, Ashley.
Hello.
We're just waiting for Pier to get placed in the room.
Great. I know we said they're having to do it all manually, so.
Did anyone else want to jump in with what brought them to the session today and what you're hoping to learn?
Go. So my name is Rakia Coven. I am an AmeriCorps member working with Eastside Community Network, but I'm more so here for my personal interest as a Wayne State graduate student in the urban planning program. I'm most passionate about how we go about land use in Detroit. So I'm here in this session just to see if I can get any takeaways about any creative uses that we have for the land, especially with proposal and passing that I wasn't too strong on, but just thinking about some other ways that we could use the many plots of vacant land that we have in Detroit and just how we better develop the vacant land we currently have.
Awesome. So we'll take one more person. Oh, and Pier has gotten here. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Adisa to give a couple of ground rules, and then we'll get started, and we'll make sure that we have plenty of time for Q&A and really have a robust discussion after we give our brief presentations.
There's still about like 40 or so people in the larger room that are being divided into the breakout rooms. So but they're gonna extend, like, basically I just heard to wait for them, you know, once everyone is in a breakout room, then we can begin, and they're gonna like build in more time at the back half of the thing, so we're not losing our hour now.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Pier, for the update.
Ms. Brown,
so with that being said, does anyone else want to share out what they're hoping to learn from the session today?
Ms. Brown, if I may, just for a moment, I'm sure I'll end up repeating myself here, but first, just let me remind everyone that you are being recorded. This is a recorded session. Also, if you could, again, I'm sure I'll say it again as more people join us, if you could put your name, perhaps title and organization into the chat, that would help us, as we will keep a transcript of that as well, for the benefit of all. I suspect there will be a report out once we get back to the general session, and so I'll be keeping notes and such and time. Thank you, Pier, for that update in terms of timing. So that we can, I'll also be keeping time for us. So we'll try to manage and see what we have. But again, back to you, Ms. Brown.
All right, awesome. Thank you so very much, everyone. Let's go to Tommy. What brought you to the session, and what are you hoping to gain out of it today?
So what brought me to the session is my organization, Detroit Blockworks. Excuse me. We've been developing maybe 11 or so vacant lots in District 1 for 3 years now. And we've also helped facilitate the creation of a neighborhood CDC. And so we want to be able to look at, you know, the feasibility of a community land trust. As well, there is the Strategic Neighborhood Fund, which is in our area as well. And so we want to maintain affordability for folks who live here today. So that's one of the reasons why I'm here. I'm really interested in community land trusts.
Awesome. Thank you, Tommy, and welcome. I see a couple of new faces that have joined us. So while we're waiting on others to join us from the larger session, we're just going around and giving folks the opportunity to let us know what they are looking to gain from today's session. So hopefully we can address all of your questions and your interests. And if not, make sure that we're connecting you to the resources and having the opportunity to connect with you after. So I am going to go to Ms. Gransberry.
Hi there. So we're just sharing why we're in the why we chose this session, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I guess it's interesting now that Tommy just brought up community land trust, which is also related to some of the work that I do. So the overarching theme of this breakout session is property and equity in the city. And I guess I have heard from different groups that the city is not as the city, right? Because there's so many different departments and agencies and pieces and folks who make up what the city is. But I've heard that they're not focusing as much on single family homes and new efforts into single family homes, but more into multifamily housing and different structures. And I guess I was just, I don't know, hoping to maybe learn something more that might be helpful in my work. So I do a lot of work with community land trusts and worker-owned cooperatives in the city and providing legal support.
Awesome. We've had a couple of other people join us, and so I'm going to go to you, Mr. Jackson. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Certainly, I chose this particular session because I'm interested in learning more about community land trust in particular, and certainly just as we at MAC Development are exploring ways to expand our housing. As the new executive director, looking to get a full understanding of what's happening in the sector, in the city, and how we might be able to, one, partner with others, and two, utilize some of our current resources to make some investments.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. And congratulations. I know that they are lucky to have you over there. It's a tremendous group doing a lot of great work in that East Side gem of a neighborhood.
Thank you.
Okay, so I saw a couple of more people. So we'll go to Evelyn and then Stephanie, and I'll look to Adias to let me know if he thinks that we are at critical mass to go ahead and get started. So Stephanie and Evelyn, we're just asking what you're looking to get out of the session today.
Hi all, I'm Evelyn. I am starting 2 companies with my dad and now business partner. One is called Citizen Robotics, which is going to be a fab lab for the built environment. And the other is Mod Public, which will be a developer focusing on using robotic construction techniques to create affordable housing. So just interested in hearing, you know, people's thoughts and experiences in the space.
Wonderful. And we'll go to Stephanie, and then I will turn it over to our wonderful co-facilitator, Adisa, so he can provide you guys more instructions, and then we'll jump right into the presentation. Stephanie?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Johnson Carbide. I work at Hope Village Revitalization. We're an older organization, but we're new too, and that we spun off from Focus Hope back in November 2019. So Before that, we were a fully owned subsidiary of Focus Hope. And so our work involves community development in the Hope Village neighborhood. I'm interested in this conversation from some of the things the other participants have mentioned, like land trust, and also just wanting to hear the thoughts around attracting new developments. So in our neighborhood, we have two major developments sort of gearing up to be in this neighborhood. One, Project Greystone, is a big box development on the Detroit Highland Park border in our neighborhood, where they're going to propose to do light manufacturing. And then we have Guyanga, which is more than a demolition contractor, but he's coming to do training, have his offices, and then have a storage and staging space for other smaller contractors in the neighborhood. And so how do we have an equitable conversation about business, residential neighborhoods, you know, in a transparent manner and a respectful manner? I hope to hear some thoughts about that, procedures and how to engage communities in an equitable way.
All right, awesome. Well, we are going to try to get to a lot of those things today. And I promise you, we will share with you what we know. What we're not directly working on, we'll be sure to make sure that we're connecting with you all after this session, so connect you with the appropriate organizations who are leading in those spaces. So take it away for the ground rules.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Brown. First, let me say again, I suspect most of us have already heard this, and so apologies for the repetition, but we are being recorded. I just want everybody to be clear, and so hopefully your backgrounds are as you would have them, and you would just be mindful that indeed you are being recorded. Also, if you have not already done so, please put your name, title, organization that you represent in the chat. We will keep a transcript of that. My name is Adisa Cheney. I will be your note taker as well as your timekeeper. And so we'll have to work with each other this evening, as it appears that we may get some additional time, but at last check, the cap was at 5:15, and so I'll wait to hear. If I hear that hopefully we will have a bit of an extended time, we'll be able to work that in, but until I hear otherwise, we'll proceed with a 5:15 or so time frame, and I'll probably put something in the chat, you know, in terms of where we are in our timing. Just for the sake of clarity, you are in the equity and property in the neighborhoods breakout session. Session is facilitated by Detroit Future City, joined by our able facilitators. I'm sure they will have a bit of introductions for themselves. We have Kimberly Faison here. We have Ashley Williams-Clark. We have Nicole Brown and Pier Davis. A bit of a caption here. Here you will look at the status of vacant land and property in the neighborhoods. Clearly there's some interest to hear about that and hear what some research is telling us about that vacant land and how people are using it. You'll look at the relationship between racial and economic equity and property ownership and discuss some indicators to measure how we make progress on this front. So I suspect, based on the introductions that we've already heard, it shall be a rich discussion. Before I hand it over to my facilitators, I was asked to very quickly share screen. There is a list of resources, Detroit Future City resources. Unless one of my facilitators pulls me back, I'm just going to actually, I have even a better idea. Each one of these resources has a link that you can check out yourself. And so what I will do is, as my facilitators are doing their thing, I will enter in a bit of a title and a link into the chat so that you can see and access the resources that was provided to me, and they will be available to everyone. My last point of instruction Please, as we have our discussions, if for the sake of recording, not only are we recording the video, but I'm taking notes, if you could say your name every time, this is Adisa and here's what I'd like to say, that would be very helpful for recording purposes. And thank you in advance. Ms. Brown, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so very much, Adisa. So again, on behalf of myself and my colleagues, Pier, Kim, and Ashley, we really want to thank you so much for joining us for this afternoon's presentation. And so in today's session, we're going to take a deeper dive into the incredible opportunities, as well as looking at some of the barriers that Detroiters face in leveraging the 24 square miles and growing of vacant land that we have in the city of Detroit, and really how our organization is helping residents and organizations like yourselves do just that through our robust work in land use and sustainability and community-based work, as well as our housing compact acquisition and rehab pilot program, which Kim will talk about in momentarily. And then also really looking at the work of our newest department, which is it's getting ready to celebrate a year in existence, which is our Center for Engagement, Equity, and Research, and really focusing in on economic equity and what that looks like when really doing a deep dive into land use and into housing policies across the city of Detroit. And so I want to give you a little bit of a background about our wonderful panel today. So Pier Davis, who serves as our land use and sustainability program manager for the organization, in her role with us, she is the primary program manager for our Working with Lots program, which I know some of you all are familiar with. It is a wonderful program that is now 6 years old, and it is done a tremendous amount of work working with local nonprofits like yourself, like many of you all who are presented here, and providing them not only technical assistance, but also funding to be able to transform vacant land within their own communities. And she'll talk a little bit more today about a wonderful project that she has to help facilitate with residents of the East Ferry Warren neighborhood. Pier possesses a bachelor's degree in environmental studies from the University of Vermont, and then a master's degree in urban planning from the University of Michigan. Go Blue for all of my Wolverines that are on the line with us. Then we also have Kimberly Faison, who is our Community and Economic Development Department Director. And so she has served in many capacities throughout her 2-decade-long career here in the city of Detroit. And then currently, one of the projects that she is spending her time on is working with our Detroit Neighborhood Housing Compact with the goal of really strengthening single-family housing delivery system in the city of Detroit by bringing together the trifecta of public, private, and nonprofit organizations, along with philanthropic partners, to be able to take the collective action and regularly collaborate around strategies that are going to really help build a robust and healthier housing market here in the city of Detroit. And most recently, Kim was with the foundation, the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation, and she is a graduate of the great Eastern Michigan University, Go Eagles, with a degree in urban and regional planning. And last but certainly not least is Ashley Williams Clark, and Ashley is our director of the Center for Equity, Engagement, and Research. And with the body of work that Ashley is leading in this incredible department, she has kicked off her tenure here with us by helping to create a community-driven definition of economic equity, bringing together stakeholders from the private sector, the public sector, as well as residents, to really create a meaningful definition of what that looks like and allowing us to be able to work from there. Currently, she is working with stakeholders on developing a set of key indicators for us to really begin to look at what does equity mean in action and how it look like in action, and how are we actually gauging Detroit's progress towards becoming a more equitable city. And so she brings to bear 10 years of experience in public policy research, analysis, community engagement, and program development. And she is a proud graduate with a master's in city and regional planning from UNC Chapel Hill, Go Tar Heels. Can anyone tell, like, I'm a huge college sports fan? And has a bachelor's degree in urban studies with a minor in Spanish from Washington University in St. Louis. And so I want to tell you a little bit about Detroit Future City. Many of you all may have heard about our organization, but may be kind of at a loss for what exactly it is that we do. And so we are really a 501c3 that was officially became an independent nonprofit in 2015. And we play a critical role in Detroit as an independent think tank policy advocacy agency that really looks at how we can provide, how we can become an innovation engine for change within the city of Detroit, and looking at how do we take the strategic framework and be able to leverage that and be able to support organizations in executing those recommendations. And so some of you all may be familiar with the Big Thick Book. It's more than just a pretty dining room table book, but it is a book that charts the future vision for our city over the course of 50 years, that was developed with an incredible amount of talent that was from both here in the city of Detroit as well as from around the world. But most importantly, it was driven by the feedback and insights of over 100,000 Detroiters over a 3-year time period, and was released in 2013. And so we work day to day, day in and day out, to help residents and nonprofit and residents and other stakeholders be able to implement some of those recommendations by providing technical assistance. And at the center of the work that we do, it is all about how are we stewarding the plan? How are we advocating for innovative approaches to policies and system changes? How are we really making sure that we're lifting up and amplifying the voice of community in all of these processes? And then also ensuring that there's racial and socioeconomic equity in all of the practices that we do. And so each of these driving principles are anchored in all of the work that we are doing here at Detroit Future City. And I really want you all to view us as an incredible resource for the work that you all are doing. And so our contact information will be provided to you all in the chat at the end of this session. So we encourage you all to please reach out to us to help with much of the work that you guys are doing within your communities. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to our first speaker, Pier Davis. And just as a reminder, if you have any questions, please make sure that you're dropping them in the chat, and we will do our best to address all of your questions at the end of the session. Pier, take it away.
Thank you, Nicole. Hi, everyone. So yeah, like Nicole mentioned, I am the manager of the Working with Lots program, but I also participated in the last year and a half in another project that we did at Detroit Future City, which was a green space planning project in the East Ferry Warren neighborhood. So just for a bit of background, in 2018, we were approached by a member of this East Ferry Warren Community Association who wanted to share the association's goals for the neighborhood and development concerns. And last year, we had the opportunity to apply for a small grant from the Americana Foundation. So since we already had that established relationship with that neighborhood, also through the Working with Lots program, in addition to the conversation that we had had with this guy, we knew that they were interested in partnering with us on a green space project. So we submitted a proposal to do a 12-month community planning project in the East Ferry Warren neighborhood, which is also known as the East Poletown neighborhood. And we ultimately had it extended several months due to this pandemic, but we're currently wrapping up the plan this month. So it'll have just been about like a year and a half since we began this project. To offer a little bit of context, we define green space as an area of grass, trees, or other vegetation that's set apart for recreational or aesthetic purposes in an otherwise urban environment, but has an intentional use, so not just vacant or untended land. And so some of the examples that we have been dealing with in this report of green space are playgrounds, forest patches, parks, playful typography, other gathering spaces or event spaces, meadows, flower farms, community vegetable gardens, tree nurseries, the list goes on, but you get the idea. And so the East Ferry Warren Community Association, they have their boundaries set as East Ferry to the north, Mount Elliott to the west, East Forest to the south, and Joseph Campow to the west, or sorry, Mount Elliott to the east, Joseph Campow to the west. But within these boundary lines, there's about 120 acres. And almost half, 46% of the parcels are owned publicly, 38% of which are owned by the land bank, and only 54% of the parcels in this boundary area are under private ownership, and that includes houses, occupied homes, or vacant homes, not just vacant land. So the breakdown of this land ownership was a major concern to the neighbors here, and that was also compounded by them observing the development in Eastern Market, which was just one neighborhood over, and them not being very happy with the Eastern Market plan and some of the development that was happening there. And they were fearful that any kind of, that some kind of land grab could happen in their neighborhood that could lead to a similar development. So that was sort of the impetus for why they wanted to embark on this type of planning project. And there were already a lot of green space projects in the neighborhood, so it really was in line with the interests of the neighborhood to begin with. But before we could really begin our job, we had to know, we had to get a better sense of the goals and some of the other things that were important to them. So the neighborhood is primarily legacy Detroiters, but they were not well represented amongst the board of the East Ferry Warren Community Association or at community meetings. And from the beginning, the community association was clear that they wanted to change this. Another point that they highlighted from the beginning was their desire to increase the vacant land ownership amongst these lifelong neighborhood residents. And to this point, the challenges with purchasing land and the process of purchasing land with the land bank continued to be brought up throughout the process. But it was really like highlighted from the beginning that it was difficult for legacy Detroiters, Detroiters with multiple jobs or even full-time jobs without access to a car, without internet, for them to embark on the process of purchasing land. So once we knew some of the goals, we were able to help them frame the planning project and begin to perform our role as consultants. We really acted as the convener and the catalyzer for this green space planning project. We facilitated community and board meetings over the last year and a half. And we also led a community design charrette last December that helped the neighborhood identify what kinds of green space they wanted to see in their neighborhood and potential locations. We leveraged our connection with the land bank to have them attend community meetings in the neighborhood to listen to the feedback from the East Ferry Warren board. And we also knew it was important to strengthen their individual relationship with the land bank so that after we completed this planning process, the lines of communication were still positive and open so that the community association could share their green space plan and that the land bank would be communicating with them when they were to maybe release parcels that went up for sale in their neighborhood. We also made sure that the land bank attended a couple community meetings, gave a presentation on purchasing lots. They also made themselves available at a community meeting last year for individual property-specific questions, which is often really difficult for neighbors to get access to. And in the green space plan that we're currently writing, we're including recommendations for both the East Ferry Warren Community Association, like internal recommendations, and for the neighborhood at large that both aim to increase the information and equity amongst homeowners to provide assistance to neighborhood residents for purchasing property, for developing green space projects and spaces in the neighborhood, and for everyone to have a more clear neighborhood green space vision moving forward. So that it's not just the vision of a handful of board members or a handful of community association members. And having this green space vision will really make it easier for them to achieve their goals in the long run and ideally influence for future developers and other players in the neighborhood. So a couple of things that came out of this process that continued to be brought up and was really important to them was just their ability to be able to offer feedback and to be heard by the land bank. You know, it's really easy to identify the gaps in these systems that like prevent equity amongst Detroit residents when it comes to home ownership or land ownership. So a number of these issues continue to arise, and although it's not as easy as asking the land bank to not sell any bundles of land in their neighborhood, which was their wish list item, you know, unfortunately you can't just ask them to not, you know, sell their land. But they were able to provide feedback. One of the things that the land bank has started doing under their like marketed properties program is offer like bundled vacant lots that are typically about $1,000 a lot. So that ends up being like $5,000 to $9,000 for a bundle of lots, which is cost prohibitive for most residents of the neighborhood. But another thing that the land bank started to offer are these homestead bundles. So instead of just offering 7 vacant lots, they'd offer 7 vacant lots plus a home that needed to be occupied. And so they were really able to say that we prefer, you know, these homestead bundles in their neighborhood because there's more community buy-in. It means someone's buying these lots, but they also are living and contributing to the neighborhood versus someone just buying the lots and maybe not even living in Detroit. Another thing that came up was through their desire to increase ownership, land ownership amongst lifelong Detroiters, was one of the members of the community association began developing some information and put it into a flyer to distribute to neighbors that had eligible side lots, to just make sure that they knew that, like, hey, did you know that the side lot next to your house is available for $100? Are you interested in buying it? Can I help you buy it? And a number of those neighbors didn't know that there was an eligible side lot and were interested in purchasing it, and also required her assistance. So that was something that I really loved that came out of this process. But I also really love it because I think it highlights a gap. It like plugs a hole in this system. You know, that it'd be great if the land bank could address this issue, but in the meantime, like, we as nonprofits or community associations or organizations can identify these holes and plug them ourselves. And I think that was like a really good example of something that she did to help increase ownership amongst lifelong Detroiters in that neighborhood. And with that, I'll throw it back to you, Nicole.
All right, awesome. Thank you so very much, Pier. Pier shared with us a lot of lessons learned in working with and developing a relationship with community organizations and helping to facilitate critical relationships with different city departments to be able to move work forward. So as we're going through the remainder of our panelist presentations, we'd love for you to consider what barriers are the community groups that you're working with within each of your neighborhoods. What are they facing, and how might your organizations be able to serve in that capacity? Just as a housekeeping item, we will actually be extending our session until 6 p.m. Due to the lag time with them having to filter in all of your lovely faces into this session. So with that note, please continue to drop in your comments and your notes into the chat. And I am at this point going to turn it over to Kim, who's going to talk about all the work that she has been leading with the Housing Compact in an amazing new pilot program, which is our acquisition and rehab program that I know many of you all are interested in from our discussion in the beginning. Kim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Pier. So Pier focused on strategies for the stewardship of vacant land for equitable outcomes, and I'll be sharing a strategy for the stewardship of single-family houses for equitable outcomes. I'm going to provide just an overview of a couple of things that we do. One of them is a forum that we convene called the Detroit Neighborhood Housing Compact. And I'm also going to share a project under its umbrella, which was designed to advance neighborhood stabilization and create affordable homeownership opportunities through the rehab of vacant houses. So the Housing Compact is a forum that brings together practitioners from a variety of sectors, such as community development, lending and banking, philanthropy, city government, and others, to focus on a number of goals. One of them is increasing the availability of move-in ready homes for sale to new home buyers. Another is to improve the quality of single-family rental housing without decreasing affordability. The next is improving housing conditions for low-income homeowners. And the last is reducing household displacement due to foreclosure, evictions, and economic hardship. We convene Compact members to provide access to research, to problem solve together around some complex issues, to provide insights as we develop publications and tools, and also to discuss policy and advocacy work. Because of a number of shared goals with the Housing Compact, building the engine of community development in Detroit hired us to develop a pilot project and then to deliver a report on single-family housing rehab and resale. The development of the project consisted of an engagement process with a number of community development organizations, the land bank, and others, and we co-created the principles and values that shaped the pilot project with the objective of advancing neighborhood stabilization through single-family housing rehab and creating equitable homeownership opportunities that could include buyers at as low as 50% of the area median income. The project was also designed with the express intention of demonstrating partnerships between the city and the community development sector, but also with the intention of leveraging the knowledge and skills amongst the partners and within the ecosystem to develop the capacity and skills at the partner table. The report that we created has two main components. The first one is a description of all of the systems level elements that impact mission-driven organizations who are seeking to develop single-family housing. Things like developer financing, homebuyer counseling and down payment assistance to develop a homebuyer pipeline, contractor selection and construction management, and a whole host of other things that it takes to do these kinds of projects. The second part of the report proposes a project model that we recommended in which the community development organization developers will work as a cohort, and that will be convened by DFC. So the project will consist of capacity building support to the community development organizations to ensure that they have success in obtaining project financing, managing construction, and attracting buyers, as well as other areas of support. It will also include the development of a financing pool for those organizations to tap into to do the projects. DFC will serve as the lead convener, and we also will be doing all of the pre-development activities, which includes things like fundraising, fundraising for both the capacity building as well as fundraising for the pool of financing that the organizations will tap to do the work. We also are doing research to support the areas of capacity building that will be built into the program. We will be applying for public, private, and philanthropic funding. And so at this point, we are wrapping up some research on cohort development and management, which included a series of interviews of the participating organizations, philanthropic funders, community development finance institutions, and the public sector. They provided insights to us about not only what they saw as organizational needs for the community development organizations who will be doing the work, but also talked about underwriting considerations relative to the financing piece. But even beyond that, they really gave some insights about the importance of this work at a systems level and the opportunity to kind of disrupt the current way of doing or not doing this kind of work, and making sure that we're disrupting the system in such a way where we are building not only the capacity and technical skills of mission-driven organizations to do this kind of work, but also to kind of assemble the resources to support their work all the way through, and the financial resources to be able to build in some of the things that are unique to mission-driven organizations. Overall, the project aims for the cohort to work collectively in acquiring and rehabbing and selling homes. The goal is 70 homes over the course of 5 years. And the goal is to sell those homes specifically to low and moderate income families in 8 neighborhoods across the city. The capacity building, again, is really meant to ensure that these organizations have the ability to succeed in obtaining the financing, managing the construction, and attracting buyers. The partnership includes 8 community development organizations, the land bank, the city, and SENER, who will be providing bridge financing for the organizations, but will also, as we move into implementation, it'll include a whole host of technical assistance providers, consultants, local contractors, and other resource partners all the way through implementation. We hope that the learning and evaluation that we plan to build into this project allows us to not only measure things like the work at the organizational level and the impacts at the neighborhood level, but also how we can systematize this kind of work so that we can kind of have deeper engagements of the ecosystem so that we can innovate better and faster in the future. And I think we still want to encourage people to use the chat for any questions that you may have. And at this point, I'd like to hand it over. Nicole, should I just go ahead and hand it over to Ashley?
Yep, absolutely. And yes, please, we are recording all the questions for a really robust discussion. So please keep the questions coming. And at this time, we are going to turn it over to Ashley. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I've been so inspired by the summit and to hear from so many inspiring people. And it's hard to follow my phenomenal colleagues, but I am really excited to share with you about the work of the center and the importance of economic equity in strengthening our region and our neighborhoods. And as we listen to Nicole and Kimberly and Pier talk, one of the common threads through all this work is really equity lens to our strategies. They both spoke about addressing systems that are creating barriers and developing the supports needed to help communities thrive. So let me start with just a little bit about the center. Detroit Future City launched the formation of the Center for Equity Engagement and Research in January of 2020. We're coming up on a year soon. And the center is continuing to build upon DFC's research portfolio of publications, special reports, and broader engagement with the goal of providing up-to-date information to residents and key stakeholders and empowering them with information so that we can move towards greater economic equity. So the center has focused this year on our Economic Equity Indicators project, recognizing that for far too long, Detroiters have been held back by striking inequities that exist across the region. And the disparities that exist in Detroit today have not appeared by chance. They are the direct result of intentional policies that have shaped our city and region. And we know that these inequitable and racist policies have resulted in the Detroit that we experience today. So it's a place where pre-COVID, we had over 40% of Detroiters, or over 268,000 people, living in an area of concentrated poverty, and 51% people spending more than 30% of their pre-tax income on rent. And where there are disparities in employment rates along racial and ethnic identities, and where we have a high vacancy rate of our land and our properties. And it's a place where the median household income in Detroit is nearly half that of the median household income of the region. And it's a place where pandemics and recessions magnify and deepen these disparities. And so while DFC has been focused on building a more resilient and equitable Detroit since the release of the strategic framework, the COVID-19 pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement, I think, have really further exposed and elevated awareness of these dark inequities. And one of the things that we've been really conscious about talking about is that while this is our reality, it doesn't have to be our future, and all of us play a role in changing that future. There's really this sense of urgency from the community to address these inequities in our community and beyond, and really emphasizing the point that when we address economic equity, it benefits all Detroiters and leads to a stronger and more resilient city and region. So this is something we should all be invested in because it benefits all of us. So through our effort, one of the things that we've been really cognizant about is, as we talk about economic equity, everybody has different viewpoints on what that might be. And so we engaged in a really robust engagement strategy over the past year, engaging with over 500 stakeholders to really develop this community-driven vision that can provide us with a guidepost to address economic equity. We need to know what we're working towards. So through this process, we developed, I'm biased, I think it's a really inspiring vision. The vision is for an economically equitable Detroit in which all Detroiters are meeting their unique needs, prospering and fully and fairly participating in all aspects of economic life within a thriving city and region. And key to having a thriving city is having strong communities and neighborhoods. Ownership of property has historically been a wealth creator in our country. In my own life, as the biracial daughter of an Afro-Latino immigrant father who lived in subsidized housing and a white mother whose family benefited from white supremacy policies, I've seen through the history of both families the role that housing ownership has played in developing generational wealth, which I personally have benefited from. However, as a result of predatory and discriminatory practices, ownership has also been a wealth and credit stripper that can prevent future access to ownership. And when someone loses a home and you have an impact on your community, it impacts not only quality of life, but it creates inequitable economic outcomes for the people living there. And so as Detroit thinks about land ownership and strengthening our housing supply ecosystem, using this equity lens will be really vital. We have to think about developing strategies and policies that actively reduce disparities while strengthening and fostering vibrant places. And I'm really interested, when everyone did their introductions about why they wanted to be here, I'm really excited to have a conversation to delve more into this community land trust model and how it could be used as a tool for equitable development through this shared equity model. So through the center, we're hoping to bring data, research, and accountability. And underneath all of that is this idea and a core value of ours of having a community engaged process and a community engaged effort. So we plan to work in partnership to support more equitable systems. We are in the process of developing economic equity indicators that are measures tied to our regional economy, neighborhoods, housing, health, education, income, wealth, access to quality employment. And these are data that will be able to be used to measure our progress and inspire us to disrupt the systems to make change. Dismantling these structures, it's not something that any one individual group or sector can accomplish. And so we've really been emphasizing the role of collective action in doing this work. And we can see how collective action models are really working through things like the Housing Compact and Kim's work there. And so we actually have 2 sessions coming up next week that I would love to invite all of you to. I'll put some details into the chat about it, where we'll have an opportunity to do some deep dives into the data and the indicators that we're in the process of developing, several of which are tied to housing, with the idea that we're looking at leading indicators, whether or not access to credit is happening, what's happening with mortgage originations. And so would love to have all of you participate in those sessions and to lend your voices and your expertise and your lived experience to our conversation surrounding the data. And with that, I will hand it back over to you, Nicole.
Sorry. Thank you so very much, Ashley. In just 2 seconds, you guys will find the link to participate in the indicator conversations below. So I would love to open up the floor with our first question to the group. I'm reflecting back on the definition of economic equity to our panelists. What does this look like if the goals of your programming were achieved? And just as a reminder, the definition of economic equity, the community-driven definition of that, is that all Detroiters are meeting their unique needs, prospering, and fully and fairly participating in all aspects of economic life in a thriving city and region. So Kim, I would like to kick it over to you and let us know what you feel that definition would mean if all the goals of your programming were met.
Oh, so many things, because I think the pilot project gets to individuals and the home buying process. It gets to barrier removals for mission-driven organizations to be able to neighborhood stabilization, but it also gets to alignment of all kinds of systems, whether it's how public dollars are allocated, how community development finance institutions lend to mission-driven organizations to do this work. It gets to the alignment of resources to make it possible for home buyers to be able to afford to buy a home, to get a mortgage, to get the counseling and wraparound supports they need on that path. I mean, it gets to so many pieces. So I think, like, in order to even get to the unit, it requires for all of those pieces to work together. So I guess looking, if we could, look down the road and say that at the end of the project, it succeeded, we would see, 70 new low mod home buyers. We would see houses that were previously vacant occupied by homeowners. We would see a lot more stewardship of the land and of the community. But I think we would also, on a systems level, see a lot more barriers being removed between practitioners in all the sectors, and just kind of working together towards that, all of those goals.
Mm-hmm. And Kim, something that you said, I believe, really resonates with the work that Pier has been able to lead through the Working with Lots program, and we see it evidenced more so in the work that she's done with East Ferry Warren, but Pier, which is around the equitable access to land and what does that land ownership mean. So Pier, can you talk a little bit about how that definition of economic equity, like how that really shows up in working with community organizations to really be able to take back ownership of that land and be able to steward it within their neighborhoods, and what that really looks like and translates to for community organizations across the city?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it continued to just come up, the difficulties with buying land through the land bank. If you don't have, access to a vehicle or internet or a number of things that have made it difficult. But I think, having a community association that will really do their best to make sure that residents that might not be tapped in to, updates from the city or updates from the land bank, that they have access to that knowledge, can really go a long ways to making sure that there's opportunities to purchase these properties or, these lots. And then even going so far as to offer help, navigating that process. Because it's not a very easy process. And another thing that they made sure to do throughout this planning process was continuously flyer the neighborhood for these community events, especially the ones where the land bank was going to be there. We had canvassers, like residents canvass the neighborhoods for small stipends. We developed a survey to really get feedback from all of the residents, to really make sure that it wasn't just the ideas of a handful or a select few, but really the input of the larger neighborhood.
Now, Ashley, I know many of our participants asked very early on about the power of community land trust in neighborhoods around building wealth for communities. So can you talk a little bit about that link and how potentially community land trust, how community land trust can help get to that economic equity vision that the community has created with your department?
Yeah, and I would invite that there are probably others on this call too who have worked way more closely on community land trust, and I would really invite you all to share your perspectives as well. And so the idea behind a community land trust is that it's a shared equity model. And so when you think of land and you think of when you buy a house, typically you're buying the land and you're buying the house combined. And so you're paying that double price of both things. With a community land trust model, there's a community organization that typically will own the land and then sell the physical structure on top of it. And so what that does is make the ownership opportunity more affordable for somebody to purchase, but it also makes sure that the land and the property stay within the overall community ownership model. And usually there's something built into the deed that when the house is sold, a certain amount of equity that the owner of the physical structure on top, they're able to realize a certain portion of that equity, but then also a certain portion is maintained by the land trust, and it can be used as a tool to increase home ownership opportunities, affordable home ownership opportunities, as well as preserve affordable housing within a community, because ultimately the underlying land is still that community.
Oh, no, actually, you froze for a moment.
Oh no, okay. I'm not sure where I froze. What was the last thing I was saying that you all could hear?
The last thing that you mentioned was about the deed and equity being built into it.
Oh wow, okay. Yeah, so at the end of the day, a community land trust model is a way to preserve affordable housing. It's a way to preserve ownership of land within a community. And it's an opportunity to achieve multiple goals of having access to ownership, having a community-led organization. The structure can vary depending on the community. One of the real kind of leaders in this space, one of the first popular models was Dudley Street neighborhood. That's worth reading up about, and how they used it as a tool to kind of reclaim and to strengthen their neighborhood. But it puts the ownership and the value of the land into the community members who participate in the land trust. Now, again, there are different models, and there's places where it's been more successful than not. Yes, I believe Dudley Street was in the Boston area. I can't remember exactly where in Boston, I mean Dudley Street, but and this was a couple decades ago that they did this, but there's some more recent examples of community land trusts. And so it really is an interesting model. It's usually combined with land banking, and so there's a community organization or entity that will purchase land throughout the neighborhood to build up a certain amount of land. Thank you, Nicole. But again, it's this shared equity model of you're building wealth within your community and maintaining that wealth within the community. So it's not going to an outside property owner or outside investor. It's staying within the community, and the community has control over what happens with it.
Yeah. And so I do want to open up the floor because I know that there was a lot of interest in talking about land trust earlier on the call for those who have experience. And so I will say that community land trusts are something that can be utilized not just for residential purposes, but it can also be used in a commercial fashion as well too. So in the city of Milwaukee, in the Minneapolis-St. Paul, and in the community of Rondo, there's actually which is a traditionally African-American neighborhood that, much like many urban cities, face significant challenges after the building of a federal highway system. And so part of what the residents did in that neighborhood is that they developed the community land trust first with the housing piece of it, but then secondly, looking at how can they control development of their commercial corridor. So unfortunately, I don't have access to the link for that information at the moment, but I will make sure that that information gets over to Lauren so that it is distributed to those of you all who may be looking at that as an option for your commercial corridors. So I do want to open up the floor to have insights shared from those of you all who may have interest in or may have worked in a community land trust model. All right, anyone? All right, so if you didn't get a chance to chime in, but you want to, please feel free to definitely drop it in the chat. So Tommy did have a question. Has the city published the long-term affordability plan? So Kim, I'm going to look to you and Ashley to provide feedback or answer that question.
So I know that there is a multifamily plan, and to some extent there is a development of a single family housing plan. I haven't read the latest and greatest. I've been able to see some of the research that was shared with the committee. It gets to findings, but the last thing that I read didn't necessarily get to an answer. I think if anything, it talks about like existing conditions and some of the challenges that that are related to affordability for both homeowners and renters, and it starts to get to some of the challenges for prospective home buyers, but not necessarily how do you reduce the affordability issues of the city as a whole. So it is something that comes up at the Housing Compact. Those are conversations that we have quite a bit, but I have not seen something that specifically says this is how we're going to reduce the affordability issue.
All right, awesome. So I also would like to point out in the chat that Mrs. Colvin also provided a reference to what is happening in the state of Georgia around community land trust. So please be sure to check the chat and click on that link and find out more information. And we're also uploading the link to the Rondo Community Land Trust. So if you're also interested in that model, you can also check it out there. So one of the other questions that seems to come up all the time when we talk about equity and we talk about development in cities is the role of government. And so I think that for mostly everyone on this call, we know that when you're talking about both of those two things, right, especially when you're looking at real estate development and affordable housing development, is that there are varying layers of governmental interactions that you have in programs. So what I would love to ask you ladies is what are the critical things that you feel need to happen from both like a city, a state, and then going into 2021 in a new presidential administration, White House administration, what are the things that you are most hopeful for in 2021 that will bring us as helping us to remove barriers to these developments and create a more equitable and just city?
Ooh, that's not a small question. That is not a small question at all. I guess I'll start since I'm not muted. I think that I hope that there's somebody that's already working on this, but we definitely need a very robust advocacy plan for federal subsidies to really get to not only issues of affordability, but also housing quality. I think that we probably, and I'll say that, and I'll put this on something that I have an interest in doing with the housing compact is just making sure that we are a lot more aligned with the kinds of things that we will collectively advocate for with regard to various policies that connect to affordability and housing quality. I think that there is an opportunity to do a deeper dive into some of the resources that already exist to support development. And there's an opportunity to educate, to support developers, whether they be landlords or those that they're redeveloping single family homes or multifamily homes, but to have better alignment, I should say, around the mission of creating more affordability, and just making sure that they have the tools that they need to do that, whether it be the lending tools that they need or the partnerships that they need to get at that issue more deeply. But you really are talking about, like, we need more money, we need more policy alignment, we need a lot more partnerships that cross sectors, and we definitely need to be able to work more closely with the city and state and federal government on policy matters.
Mm-hmm. Pier, what's on your wish list for 2021? I feel like some of those things are coming to pass a little bit day by day now with some of the new DBLA policies that are being rolled out this fall.
Well, since it's a wish list, I would say rent and mortgage loan forgiveness in this pandemic would be high up on my list. Do I think it's going to happen is another question.
Yeah, and that's a big one, Nicole. That's a really big question. I think, you know, I think one thing that I would like to see, and this is, I think, in some ways piggybacking off of Kim, is the democratization of processes so that we aren't just supporting the same developers, so that we are really looking at creating pathways to ownership and not just looking at it from the standpoint of like, okay, well, we've created this program, now everyone should be good to go. Really looking actively, you know, we talk a lot about like having an equity lens, and I'm thinking just about, it's not just having a lens, it's like if you follow any of like Ibram Kendi's work around like not just being, I'm not racist, being actively anti-racist, like how can we actively take these principles of equity and bring them into action? And I think looking at our land sale disposition policies, but not just the policies, looking at what the supports are needed surrounded things. So mentorship, sponsorship of people, of providing access to credit for folks that they can purchase land, but really from a government perspective, you know, really taking an equity lens to the processes. How can we democratize the processes for purchasing land?
And it actually speaks to a comment that Tommy posted a little bit earlier about the need to address our tax foreclosure system and sort of like what the long-lasting penalties are of it, because he posted in the chat that if you have a tax foreclosure, you're not able to purchase a house through the land bank. And so what does that look like if you are really trying to keep Detroiters in homes and convert and begin to sort of shift that market from Detroit being a primarily single family home rental market to really being able to give people tools? And Ashley, as you said, it really, that access to credit, but also the access to financial literacy to be able to bring all of those things together so that we're really creating like a next generation of homeowners and land stewards throughout the city of Detroit. I do want to get to one of the comments that we have in here. So Tommy also said the answer to the wish list question is that every neighborhood needs public-private partnerships. The private market can't fix our market equitably, can't fix our market, our housing market equitably. And a yes. So we've talked a lot about physical development in the city of Detroit. So Pier, I'd actually like to toss this over to you and talk about and ask you, what do you feel it would take to help community organizations be able to equitably really focus in on developing green space within their neighborhoods? Not at this year's State of the City, but 2 years ago, Mayor Duggan declared that he wanted to have green space and, quite frankly, a park within a 10-minute walking distance of every neighborhood. And so while our general services department and the parks department are really working toward reevaluating the park system that we have here in the city of Detroit, we know that there are 24 square miles of vacant land, and with proposal in, which is going to call for the demolition or rehab of 8,000 blighted structures within the city of Detroit, there's going to be even more opportunity to look at how do we activate green space. And so whether that green space is for green stormwater infrastructure to help mitigate flooding and combined sewage overflows and all of those things, what do you see as the biggest thing that as a group of practitioners on the call that we can do to help residents really take control of those neighborhood lots within their community?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's lots of elements to that. I mean, from a more like umbrella sort of like, there's certainly enough land in the city. I think so. I mean, that's not the problem, and I think funding is often a problem. Whether it's like districts somehow allowing there to be more funding allocated for parks and maintenance of parks, but I think community organization wise, I mean, I think there's definitely the passion and the interest at having neighborhood parks, like within 10 minutes, walks of homes, but maintenance is always a challenge. I think getting on the same page amongst like a block club is often a challenge that we've seen. I think there's so many block clubs that have similar interests, and there often isn't communication between the two that I've seen throughout the Working with Lots program, where one applicant will apply to transform a lot on one side of the street, and another block club a year later will apply to do something across the street. And it's like, well, what happened? Where is that miscommunication or the lack of communication? That like, why aren't these two groups that represent a very similar area working together to create this space? And there's often a lot of maybe like ownership or just having like different ideas. Capacity is a huge issue. Oftentimes we see, one person having this grand idea, and then, one thing out of 1,000 possibilities can happen that reduces their capacity. So then it's who's managing the site now. So it really needs to be more than just like a one woman show. And I think that there needs to be a larger collective working together, whether it's like a convener of block clubs, right, like a CDC or something larger. And then maintenance is always a huge issue. So once you have this project in the ground, really trying to like start small, like only picking a couple plants, a couple types of trees, so that everyone knows what it is, everyone knows how to maintain it, versus getting confused down the road as to like what's a weed and what's a flower. And so just like manageable and make sure everyone's involved, and that you're really representing like a larger neighborhood, and really getting a good like maintenance and watering plan together before you start.
Yes, all good points. And so I do want to bring in some folks from the chat. So this is Colvin. To your point, Pier, one of the things that she said is there's also a lack of transparency around the land bank and like actually like what inventory is available for purchase within their neighborhood, transparency around the sales process for those lands, but also to your point, Pier, as seconded and thirded from the choir of Sandy and Tommy and many others in the group, that the capacity of Block clubs is stretched, right? We have a lot of legacy Detroiters who've been here for a very long time, and they may be the active few that are holding it down on their block, and for many, many reasons, they may not necessarily have the support or capacity to be able to do a lot of the work that they want to. But I'm interested and would love to open it up, because we have such tremendous leaders, community leaders on the call. How have you all been successful in activating your residents to be able to participate in a lot of this work that we've talked about through your own agencies? And what are some of the supports that you feel are needed to help build capacity of residents to participate in really transforming their neighborhoods, whether it's green space or working to create the next developers of color or the next women developers within your neighborhoods? I'm gonna pick on some people if I don't hear, if nobody pipes
You
in.
might have to.
I got some friends on the call.
There's so much talent on this call for it to be quiet.
Tommy, come off mute.
All right, Kenyatta, I'm gonna go to you, ma'am, because I know you got a lot of amazing work that's taking place over in the Cody Rouge neighborhood.
You're muted.
Sorry about that. I knew you were going to call my name. I felt it. I was about to call me. All right. So could you repeat your question, please? I apologize.
Yeah. So we really want to know how your organization has been successful in really sharing best practices of how to scale up the capacity of your residents who are your Block club leaders, and really how you have been able to really spur them to become really engaged in like your neighborhood planning efforts, particularly around housing and land use within the community, because I also know that you all are one of the strategic neighborhood fund neighborhoods for the city as well too, and have received a lot of support due to your hard work and the hard work of all the residents and your staff.
Yeah, so definitely it's been a team effort. We have a lot of great community partners that have worked alongside us. So prior to the strategic framework, we had a really strong relationship with Black Family Development, who assisted our community with helping with build the capacity of the resident leaders and also the associations. So through that, we were able to make sure that these associations and Block clubs were equipped with the necessary things they needed in order to build within their areas. As you all know, each area within a neighborhood has different issues. So it was really key that we were able to work directly with each association and Block club to kind of help them build their capacity, show them how to develop their board of directors, and then also how to really do effective outreach and making sure that everyone was included in the decisions. We also have had other community partners that we worked with, and then frankly, we've kind of looked at like some of the things that have been going on in other neighborhoods. Being we were part of the Skillman Foundation Good Neighbors Initiative, as a team, we were working closely with other neighborhoods. So we would constantly share best practice. Sometimes we'll have healthy competition, to say, figure out different strategies to use, and then kind of try those things out in other neighborhoods. So in reference to like the housing, being that, like I said earlier, our organization have done a little around housing, but not a whole lot. So what we decided to do, instead of trying to do everything on our own, bring in other partners to come in. For instance, we were able to bring in National Faith, who were able to develop over 15 homes in Cody Rouge, and then also help build our capacity so that now we're able to do some like the front porch repair projects on our own, and then working alongside agencies like Joy Southfield Community Development. So it's basically has been like a team approach, connecting with various organizations, trying to make sure that everybody's staying in their lane so that no agency is burnt out. So that's pretty much how we've been able to do it in Cody Rouge. And then being able to specific to the strategic framework, we were the first neighborhood, well actually the only neighborhood thus far that the city has partnered with to have it led by the young people. So we've been able to really develop our youth so that they're understanding the importance of housing development, commercial development, and how those things interconnect. Not saying it was perfect, because it definitely was It was a long, long, long time. We're at the end of the process now, but the young people have definitely learned a lot. They challenged the city, and then they're also like, you know, trying to play negotiation now. So just pray for us as we end this last piece with the strategic framework plan.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And I want to tease out a couple of points that Kenyatta shared. Was one is the importance of bringing young people along in this journey, right? Many of us on this call are mid-career professionals, elder statespeople in community development, and this work is all great that we're doing, but for it to continue, we have to be intentional about cultivating that next generation of talent and making community development an exciting field for them to be able to get into. It's not, it is not necessarily the most common thing that you hear kids say that they want to do, but we have to make it common because we want them to be able to see the value in investing and working in the places where they live to make it better for not just them, but for all of their neighbors and generations behind them. I see also, speaking of veterans in this community development sector, I'd love to be able to toss it over to Patricia Dockery, who I've known for years, who has been doing amazing, great work in the North End district of the city of Detroit. So Pat, can you share with us, first of all, hello, Ms. Pat.
Hi there.
Hey. Can you share with us a little bit about how you have really been able to work with neighbors over the years to help build capacity and build voice and advocacy around land use? And I know you were at the table for like early discussions around community land trust before it became like the big sexy thing in community development to talk about.
Well, thank you for inviting me to speak. I am trying to be retired, but I still get drawn in to different projects going on in the neighborhood. But my organization, Stafford House, we're still very much involved in development because that's one of the projects that we're doing on Oakland Avenue commercial corridor. We are doing commercial development and housing and bringing businesses to the commercial corridor. But I think that it's always been a challenge to try and interest people in the community in what's going on. And so what I found that worked for us is to invite everyone to come to social events, and those events being outdoors. So when we had meetings that we would call neighborhood meetings, and we would go and we'd be meeting at the church or this place or that place, nobody showed up for those meetings. But when we had social events at a park or the neighborhood park or a lot that we just turned into a park, and we invited everybody to come out, share a dish, we were able to connect the elderly people, the native Detroiters, the newcomers. And so everybody got to meet each other face to face in a social gathering, that was not as contentious as sometimes meetings are. So the social meeting worked, and getting the information out to people. We formed some new block clubs. And so the challenge has always been to interest young people. When I say that, I'm talking about under 40, the 30s and 20s. That was the challenge, to try to get them to participate in community organizations. But, we keep trying. And so that's been one of the things we've done in North End.
All right, awesome. Thank you so very much, Ms. Dockery. So we only have a few minutes left, but I want to give space and place to one of our rising young stars in community development and civic engagement. So Tommy, I would love for you to speak to the work that you've been doing over the last couple of years and how you've been able to really get out and engage residents and block clubs in this kind of work. I know that you've done work with the old Redford community and the development of the link, and you're now working with O'Hare Park. So can you share with us a little bit around your best practices and how you are fighting the good fight and getting more people engaged in the process?
Yeah, so kind of the genesis of my career in community development happened at the same time that the Strategic Neighborhood Fund was coming into our area. So I had been previously worked in real estate development, And so I had this knowledge. These economic forces were coming into my neighborhood. And so I thought, how can I be useful? And so really, the genesis of the work was being a translator, holding office hours at coffee shops, at libraries, and leaning on my existing relationships in the neighborhood. I'm organizing in the neighborhood that I grew up in. And so I already had those relationships with a lot of the block club leaders, a lot of residents in the neighborhood, and a lot of organizations in the neighborhood. So it was really easy for me to organize folks around, you know, particularly folks that had been in the neighborhood for, 30 years, 25 years, because, I've lived here all my life. So it's been really, I think, given COVID, it's been hard to convene in the same way that we used to in person. So I find myself, spending hours on hours just calling people, just asking how they are, updating them on everything and anything I know about, what's happening with the planning in the area. And I've actually been able to work with the city in Brilliant Detroit recently to hold a session about the OREFR link not too long ago. So I'm really just leaning on my pre-existing relationships and the neighborhood, my connectedness to the neighborhood.
Awesome. So I know we only have a couple of minutes left. So one of the things that Tommy said, and we believe, if you didn't hear it throughout all of our panelists today, is really the power in building relationships and really helping people to see outside of the work that they do and where they live, to be able to connect with one another. So this work is not easy. It is very hard work, and it's work that you absolutely have to work to build those relationships, whether it is with the other nonprofits and other organizations and block clubs in your community, as evidenced by the conversations that were shared by Kenyatta, Patricia, and Tommy, and also looking at how do you cultivate those relationships within the various city departments, and figuring out how can you operate as that bridge between communities and funders and city government agencies and nonprofit organizations to be able to help. We at Detroit Future City would also like to be a resource to all of you all. It is our mission to be able to help drive the strategic framework together and to be forward and the recommendations, but those recommendations and that work can only happen with organizations like yourselves on the ground, who are really doing the heavy lifting and hard work of helping to move Detroit forward to being a more equitable and just, resilient, and my favorite term, greener city. And so with that note, please always feel free to reach out to us, and you can learn more about Detroit Future City at www.detroitfuturecity.com. And if you have any questions or you'd like to be able to connect with us, you can always drop us a line at info@detroitfuturecity.com. So I think we only have 1 minute left. So I'd like to give it over to my colleagues. You guys have 30 seconds to give closing comments, and I'm going to start with Ashley.
Well, I would like to give a thank you to our fearless moderator, Nicole. You've done a wonderful job. And I think in all that we do in looking at advancing economic equity and the role that land plays in that is really remembering to take this systems lens to things, look at policies with a critical lens to think through what barriers they're creating and what changes need to take place to impact the systems to make it more equitable and to lead to more economically equitable outcomes.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. Pier.
I also just want to say thank you for everyone for joining this panel, and Nicole for moderating. And I don't really have anything else to offer, so I'll just hand it to Kim.
All right, Kim, bring it on home for us.
I would just say that, you know, I was in an interview. We were interviewing a community leader recently, and she said something to the effect of they count on us learning slowly and individually. And that just resonated with me so much. In order for us to disrupt power, we have to collaborate. And so whether we just have to find new ways to collaborate and work more closely together in order to achieve what we want to achieve. So that's what I would leave you with.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you all so very much. You can see I'm dropping in some information into the chat, so please feel free to reach out and connect with us. We are online, so please take these resources, share them with your networks. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook, as well as YouTube. Lots of great videos, lectures that we've done. Also, there are links that were emailed to you by Lauren to all of the reports that we have. So please send them, share them, and it has been a joy to be able to connect with all of you all, break bread virtually, and share some great knowledge and best practices. So I think that we should be I think that they're going to be moving us over any moment now. Is that correct, Mr. Cheney?
That is what I understand, Ms. Brown, and so we shall see and wait for that all-telling join queue, as it has just appeared right on time. I think you made it happen, Ms. Brown. Just your
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Hi, everybody. I see everyone starting to flow back in. I think a few groups are just finishing up their conversation, so we're going to give them about 2 minutes, and then we'll be ready to move on to discussing all of the things that we talked about in our sessions.
What up? I see Savannah Brewer in the audience. What up, Savannah Brewer? What up, though? Seeing some good people. Hey, Miss Pat Dockery. Hey. Kenyatta Campbell is in the building. Hey, y'all. Shout out to Kenyatta Campbell, Cody Rouge in the house.
What up, though?
What up, though? I saw you all on Facebook today with your consultation. You go, girl.
Shouting out like we had a real party, for real, for real.
Hey, you know, that's how we do. You know what I'm saying? We want people to have a good time. I see.
Hey, Kenyatta.
Huh?
Y'all saying, hey, Kenyatta.
Hey, right. Hey,
how are you?
I'm all right.
Killmonger from Black Panther. We see the new executive director of Mac Development, Antoine Jackson, in the building. What's up, man? Hey there. Oh, man. Good to see y'all. Come on in. Come on back in.
Orlando, I've been jumping around to the different breakout discussions. Some really, really dynamic conversation.
Yeah, I would say so. I was in one room and it was really powerful.
Yep.
Can't wait to hear about it. So hopefully everybody has their designated reporter outers.
Yeah, I think my sense of it is that the facilitators believe that they're doing the reports out.
Okay,
could be
great.
wrong, but yeah.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yep.
Camille, we'll wait for you to give us the cue to go ahead and get started once everyone is sort of back.
Okay, I'm looking now, and it looks like everyone is back here. Let me just check real quick. Yeah, I think everybody's back in the main room.
All right, Alondra, take it away.
Okay, so we wanted to have a conversation where everyone could just highlight what they heard,